Okay, so it is 11. I just wanted to introduce everybody to Judge Westfall. She is a criminal district judge, and we're really happy to have her today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. My name is Mollee Westfall. I'm judge of the 371st District Court, and I am planning on giving you guys just an overview of what my background and what steps I took to get from where you guys are right now to where I'm sitting at this moment, and what it involves. So I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, and went through high school, public school, all the way there, and attended the University of Texas on a scholarship. I studied liberal arts when I was at UTA. I was in the Plan 2 program, if any of you are familiar with that program. It's a wonderful liberal arts education, but it doesn't really train you to do anything in particular. And maybe some of you are in that position right now where you're studying English or government or a foreign language or something that doesn't lead directly to a career path. Those majors are actually excellent training ground for law school. If you are learning how to think critically about texts or think critically about abstract issues and be able to explain your position, then those are skills that transfer directly over to law school. And for those of you who are not in a liberal arts major, maybe you're in a business major or a technical STEM major, or an arts major, one of my dear friends who's a lawyer, she attended Baylor University on a piano scholarship, and she's one of the best lawyers that I know. Piano majors, as it turns out, they work very rigorously to prepare their pieces for performance, and that is a skill that transfers directly to getting cases ready for trial. So there's all kinds of things that you're learning in undergraduate that will equip you for law school in your various fields. And basically anyone who's studying anything, you're learning skills that can take you to success in law school. When I was in high school, both of my parents, my mother attended some college but did not graduate. My father was an animal husbandry major. He had grown up on a farm. So neither of my parents had any particular insight about college. They left it completely to me about what kind of college I wanted to go to, doing my application, applying to Plan 2, gathering up everything. I mean, they thank you. They wrote a check for my application fee, and that was pretty much it. So I was kind of on my own in college for deciding what my next step might be. I mean, my parents didn't have any background, and should I go to graduate school, which I was thinking about graduate school in English, or should I go to law school, or should I don't feel like I'm prepared to take any job at this point. So I decided that I would take the LSAT and see how I did. And I scored very well on the LSAT. Back then, there weren't really prep courses for the LSAT or even the SAT. So you just took it and hoped for the best. I looked at some practice questions beforehand. Also, no internet, so you couldn't look anything up on the internet to see advice or practice ideas or really anything, because the internet did not exist at that time, or it did, but we didn't have access to it. So we just had to kind of go on what little we might know about. So I decided to take the LSAT. As I said, my grades were pretty good. So I applied to UT Law School and Texas Tech Law School. Since I was from Lubbock, it kind of made sense to me, since my parents still lived there, that I might want to look at Texas Tech. So I got into both of the law schools, and then I got a full scholarship to Texas Tech. That made my decision very easy. Law school, I'd not paid anything for college since I'd gone to college on a scholarship. And I had the prospect of free law school, and the idea of taking out loans was terrifying to me, even back then when it was so much less expensive. Now law school, I know because I'm on the Texas Tech Law Foundation board, law school is just the tuition, I want to say, is $20,000 or something very high, plus the living expenses. So it's dramatically more expensive what you guys are looking at than what we were looking at, but I still felt very overwhelmed at the idea of taking out loans to pay for law school at UT. When I was making that decision between UT and Texas Tech, what really played in my mind was the idea that I expected to stay in Texas. And while UT has a national reputation, Texas Tech has a very strong statewide reputation. So as long as you don't plan on going to do federal work or try to work at an international law firm or clerk for the Supreme Court, then you would probably do fine at Texas Tech. And that's what I decided, that it would be better to have a free law school education than go somewhere that's nationally ranked, since I'm not going to go anywhere outside of Texas. And that is one bit of advice that I would pass on to you. There's most of the law schools in Texas are very well known in Texas and very well regarded, have good alumni bases. I mean, Texas Tech is so, even though it's out in Lubbock, it has alumni all over the state and very strong alumni base because it's been in operation for 50 years and has 50 years of good lawyers that they've graduated. Really, most of the rest of the law schools in Texas, you'll look at their stats and they're kind of clustered closely together, or if they're not, the difference in ranking may make a difference if you're wanting to do something very high profile or difficult to attain. But if you are planning on practicing some kind of law in Texas, the well-regarded regional law schools will serve you well, and it will also probably be less expensive to attend. So I decided on Texas Tech. And one thing that I think it's important for you all to know, let me just say, it's so strange to talk to a screen and not see anybody's face, but I assume that, I'm hoping that this is of interest to you. When I was in high school, I was editor of the school paper. I was on academic decathlon. I was involved in youth and government. I mean, I did things that were, I would say pretty high on the nerdy scale. I was a big reader and a very shy person. I kept to myself and didn't really I had no interest in making speeches or running for student office or anything like that. And that continued into college. I mean, I was more of a reader and a writer and a thinker than I was a speaker. And when I went to law school, I was a little bit worried about how that would go. You get called on, you have to get up and state your position or make an argument, or the professor asks you to explain the holding from a case that you've read the night before. And I was worried about having to do that, but I decided, I'm going with this LSAT. It says I'm going to be pretty good at this. And so I'm going to give it a try. And I stepped outside my comfort zone. And that is something that I strongly urge you all to do. I think that as women as a group, I know women as a group tend to underestimate themselves and their abilities because of the way that society is vis-a-vis women. You may not get those messages at home. I certainly never did, even though my parents may not have been the most educated people in the world. They were always all about, you can do whatever you want. You make your own life. And that's really true. Men do receive different messages. I mean, they receive the message that you can do literally anything that you think you can do, even if you're not technically qualified to do it. If you don't have the background or any of the previous restrictions that they say for a particular job, go ahead and apply because you might get it. Whereas women say, you know, gosh, I don't meet the qualifications, so I'm not going to apply. I think that mindset will, I mean, I know it will trip you up. You can do exactly what you decide you can do. And in law school, I decided that I wanted to make myself a better speaker and try to be more confident about that. And the only way forward, the only path forward to do that is to do it, is to get out there and say, I hate this and I'm terrified of it, but I'm going to try it anyway. Everyone in Texas Tech, the intramural advocacy competitions were very big. Everybody competed. You didn't have to compete. It was completely voluntary, but everyone did. And so I thought, you know, I'm going to try it too. I'm not particularly thrilled about doing this, and I'm not sure I'm going to be good at it, but I'm going to try. So I did not, you know, I was mulling it when they posted, oh, you know, the mock trial competition's coming up. You need to find a partner. You'll be on a team, sign up. You'll get a coach assigned. You'll go to compete in January. And here's the mock trial problem. So I didn't really rush to find a partner because I was hesitating. And as it turned out, you know, a lot of people teamed up really quickly. And the person, a classmate ended up asking me instead of me asking someone. So my classmate, who is a very nice person, a lovely person, and a really good lawyer. I mean, at the top of the class, as it turns out, we were still first year, so we didn't have any rankings at that point. She ended up at the very top of the class and has a great legal mind, but she was older. She was in her 40s. She'd come back to law school after a divorce, and a bitter divorce that she talked about a lot. And she had a very pronounced stammer. So when she would answer questions in class, I mean, it was like a kind of a long, slow process because it really did take her a long time to get her answers out because she had a stutter, and it was exacerbated, of course, by stress. But she, you know, as I said, still has a really fine legal mind. It's just the speaking part. Well, she asked me to be her mock trial partner, and I was already low on confidence myself. And being partnered with someone who has a very pronounced stutter, and good on her that she was brave enough to jump out there and do it. But it was very rough. It was very rough. Our first competition, we went up against a couple of boys who had teamed up together, and they had worked for hours to get ready for this mock trial competition. They had videotaped themselves making arguments and in prep. I mean, and back then, video cameras were not easy to come by. I don't even know how they had one. We didn't have cell phones. And so there was not just a video camera in your purse. But they did all this preparation. They memorized the different objections from the rules of evidence, and they were over prepared. And here I was, you know, dying with my partner, who I knew it was just going to be a long, slow process to go through a mock trial. And it's time too. So all that time, you know, was time that we didn't get any content out. And by the end of it, I was just sinking through the floor. But as it turned out, the assigned coach for the team that went up against us came up to me afterwards and said, I thought you did really good in there. I said, what are you talking about? Please don't condescend to me. and I said, thanks, but come on, man. Because we got hammered. We lost by the largest margin of any team that night. And I knew that we would. But I kept telling myself, this is for my own personal, growth. It doesn't matter. I'm just not going to pay. We'll get knocked out next round and it'll be over anyway. So the next day I saw the coach for the other team again, and he approached me again and said, I really didn't mean that. I mean, I think that you could be good, and I'm very sincere about that. And so we ended up going out on a date, and we're married now. So it all kind of, I guess, turned out for the best, even though it was a pretty uncomfortable experience at the time. But stepping outside my comfort zone, even in the painful experience that I had with mock trial for that first mock trial, it really taught me a lot. And, at the end of it, yeah, maybe you're embarrassed and maybe you didn't do your best and maybe, the whole situation made you wanted to hide under the bed. But I really did learn a lot from it. And I learned that no matter in law, if you mess something up, it's embarrassing, but you're not going to die from it. Nobody's dead, nobody's maimed, nobody's even wounded. It's just a learning experience. And another thing about law and life is most of the experiences that teach you the most will involve some amount of personal pain, maybe not physical pain, but pain nonetheless. And so it was a growing experience for me. You can be terribly embarrassed and yet still live. And people don't, there may be a little bit of chatter about, man, what happened in that round for about 10 minutes, but everybody starts living their lives the next day and they forget all about it. That's just the way it goes. And when you work in an area where you go on to have wins and losses regularly, you have to develop that thicker skin mindset of, this is just this case, this day. This may be painful, but tomorrow I'm going to get up and fight again. And it's going to be a different fight. And, I'm going to take what I learned from this one and I'm going to do better next time. And that's just part of being a trial lawyer. There's all kinds of different kinds of law you can do, as I know you're all aware. My younger brother ended up going to law school somewhat after I did. He went to UT also, and he had good grades and I guess a good LSAT. By the time he took his LSAT, I was in law school, but he applied to Georgetown because he wanted to do international law, and he went there for 3 years. Now he does do international law for Baker Botts. He's a senior partner with them, and he does international oil and gas. He gets paid so much money. It's just obscene, but he also travels 6 months out of the year to foreign countries and is away from his wife and 3 children. So, that's sort of the balancing act of making money and doing something very high profile. But he also didn't pay off his law school debt until about 5 years ago. And so it's, you have to decide what is important to you. And because he got accepted to UT Law School, which would have been a lot less expensive for him, but he wanted to go to the highest name international law school that he could, and it served him very well, and that's what he likes. But I'm glad that that I didn't go down that path. It would not have been a path that suited me. It's difficult for you to know when you're sitting in college or law school what path is going to suit you. So don't ever make up your mind. If you told me my first year of law school, hey, you're going to be an assistant DA and try cases, and then you're going to be a trial judge, I would have laughed in your face. That's not me, and that's not going to happen. So I, went through law school. I continued to participate in mock trial and moot court and the intramural stuff. And I also joined the law review my second year. So I was in law review, and I ended up joining board of barristers not because I was a great advocate or because many of my classmates they're sort of naturals at speaking. At not just sounding smooth, but clever, quick on their feet, very comfortable in those kinds of settings. And I was just learning to be like that. And they had come to law school already doing that. People who just had natural talent, or maybe they had been involved in mock trial or moot court at their college, which gives you a lot of practice in that area. So there were a lot of talented people, and I just, didn't have that particular talent. But if you want to learn something, you can learn it. And so I just continued to work on that. And because I participated very faithfully in mock trial, moot court, negotiations competition, client counseling competition, I ended up being invited to join the board of barristers, which is the advocacy board, just by virtue of continuing to show up and to try, not because I won any of those competitions. And so I, entered my third year of law school. You take the bar. I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. So I ended up working with a solo practitioner. My husband and I married. He was a year ahead of me in law school. So he was already at work in Fort Worth. I moved to Fort Worth and we married, and I worked with a solo practitioner, and I found out from doing it, I really do not like doing civil law. It was a lot of, we had hearings and I did discovery, but we didn't have any trials. It was mostly office work, and I was just dreadfully bored. So my husband, who was working in criminal law as a criminal defense attorney, said, why don't you give criminal law a try? I think you might like it. And I was, I was taken aback by the very idea, but I thought, you know what, why not? It sounds kind of fun. I'm working with a bunch of other young people. So I put in my application, and they happened to have an opening around that time. And so I got an interview and I got the job. And that, I was terrified. During my first day on the job, I watched my court partner pick a jury. The second day on the job, by 9 a.m., I was giving an opening statement in a DWI case. And that was definitely, outside the comfort zone experience for me. But with practice, you can learn anything. And I've known a lot of trial lawyers now, and while I've had my moments of brilliance in the courtroom, I would say, I'm not the natural talent at it either. I've had my moments, but I'm not just naturally great at it. There are some people who, when they walk into a courtroom and they're in front of a jury, it's like a duck in water. I mean, it is their natural habitat. That's not me. But if you like the job, or at least like enough of the job to where you want to work to get good at other parts of the job that you're not as good at, that's what I decided to do. And, preparation, watching other people do their thing in court and picking up ideas from them, I became a better and, a competent trial lawyer. I ended up getting promoted to felony. And from felony, I got promoted to CDC 1, which the current criminal district attorney was the judge of CDC 1, and she was really she was a tough judge to try cases in front of. She was very hard on both sides, and in that situation, you learn a lot and you learn it quickly. So even though it was a little bit stressful, I was able to become a better trial lawyer very quickly when I was in CDC 1. And so I went from there. I was invited to join the Crimes Against Children unit, where I tried child abuse cases, mainly sexual abuse cases, but some physical abuse cases, for about 3.5 years. And that is rewarding work, challenging work. You really feel like you're doing something that means something when you're trying those kinds of cases. And you have to meet with children and get them ready to testify. That's the hard part of the job. The great part of the job is seeing people found guilty and watching them get punished for what they've done to children, which, it was very satisfying, but extremely hard work. Toward the end of my time in Crimes Against Children, I got pregnant and had my first child. So I had my son Bennett when I was, in 2001. And I had him in February of 2001. And then by I think December of 2001, I got assigned. I had my maternity leave, and then it was time for me to rotate out of Crimes Against Children. I'd been in there for almost 4 years. So I got assigned to another felony criminal court where, I tried all kinds of cases, and I had my second child, Catherine, my daughter, in 2003. It is very difficult to balance trial work, pregnancy, and infants. Very difficult. It's something that you have to just decide, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to figure out a way to do it. The week that I had my son, I was in trial. I picked a jury on Monday in a child abuse case, and we finished up by Wednesday. It was a really short case. And then by Thursday, I went into labor, and on Friday I had him. So I don't recommend that. I can tell you, if I were ever in a decision-making capacity in any law firm, I would say, by the time we get to 8.5 months, women should be out of the courtroom, because it's very hard to try a case when you're 9 months pregnant. But but I did it. And when I came back to work, I was concerned about balancing, being a nursing mother and having trials, meeting with witnesses, going to docket. But I found that even the old-fashioned judges, I came back and tried a high-profile case almost immediately in front of a judge who was the age of my grandfather. And I was still nursing, so I had to ask him to give me extra long breaks so that I could pump in the middle of trial. And it was not a, particularly pleasant experience for either of us, but he was as nice as he could be about it and very anxious to make sure that I had plenty of time and I wasn't rushed in any way. And that, these are the kinds of things that you have to learn how to balance when you're a young mom and working in trial work. And now, years later, after I had my children, Tarrant County announced this initiative probably 3 years ago that we want to support nursing mothers, and we're going to make sure. I mean, I have my own office. That's the thing. If I needed to go pump during a break, I could go to my office. But lots of people work in this building, like who are clerks and secretarial workers, and they work in cubicles, and they don't have a private area. So Tarrant County announced an initiative where we're going to have on every floor of every building a room where nursing moms can go so that they can have privacy if they need to pump breast milk, which is, that's great. I was sadly too long in coming. I mean, when I started in the DA's office in 1996, they still allowed smoking in this building, which is amazing to think about because that's definitely not a thing anymore. So by the time I had my daughter, right after I had my daughter, I tried when I came back, I tried a big intoxication manslaughter that we charged as a murder. And it was kind of a groundbreaking, first time that we'd ever tried one of those cases as a murder case, because he had two prior driving while intoxicated offenses. So he was committing the offense of driving while intoxicated felony while he struck and killed someone in his car. And the law in Texas says that if you're in the process of perpetrating a felony and a life is taken, even if it's accidental, then that can be something that's called felony murder. If it's foreseeable that in the course of committing your felony that a life would be taken. Or that someone got killed in any manner. So we charged that as a murder. And, that was, again, while I had a breastfeeding baby, and we had the press following us all week. It was on the news every night. It was quite an experience. But my trial partner was a dad himself, who was my supervisor in misdemeanor. And he made sure that I was supported and had everything I needed and all the time that I needed away from the courtroom during that trial, which was fantastic. About the time, I started in 1996 in the DA's office. And so once my daughter got to be about a year old, I had someone who was a local Republican activist approach me and say, look, I think you've got what it takes to run for judge, which I had never really, everyone kind of thinks if you're in front of judges regularly, you think, hey, I think I could do a better job than you, at least in front of some of the judges. Some of the judges do a great job, but others are like, you get elected you get the job by being a politician. And so some people can be a great politician and a great judge. Other people don't have both of those roles down. So everybody kind of thinks about it, but it's the politician part that keeps people from doing it because it's hard to get elected. So she approached me, said, let's go to lunch. Hey, have you ever thought about running for judge? And I was like, honestly, no. I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and that's not really top of mind. She said, well, I think you would be great. Let me take you around to some Republican events and introduce you around and see how you like it. So she started taking me around to introduce me around, and I got kind of involved. And then, I decided over the course of that, I think I can do this. This was about a 2.5-year process. You don't just jump into it and suddenly do it one day. You need to get your feet wet and learn your local landscape and figure out where you are in it, I decided I would run against a sitting judge, a sitting Republican judge, who I thought, in my view, was not well qualified and not doing a particularly good job, even though he had been on the bench for 3 terms. So I ended up announcing my candidacy, which is a whole long, I mean, that would be a speech all by itself, the whole political process. But I can tell you that it's ugly. And, the things that you would see, say, if you watch the political process in the last presidential election or in any election, really, the exact same dynamics are at play in every election, from city council all the way up to the presidency and everywhere in between. There's cheap shots and dirty campaigning and name calling and a lot of negativity. And you have to go around and campaign, just like, I wouldn't say I was on a presidential schedule. I was still working full time too, and had my little kids, but I had to do a lot of extra meetings and campaign events and doing my politician thing in addition to doing my law thing. But I had some pretty good points, I felt like, that where that judge had fallen down on the job, that were well documented. And I ended up beating him by a 10-point margin. So he didn't really put up that good of a fight, because he wasn't much of a fighter either, as well as not being a particularly great lawyer. So I ended up getting this job, and this is what I've been doing ever since. I got elected in March of 2006. I beat the incumbent. I didn't have an opponent in the general election in November of 2006. I took this bench over on January 1st, 2007, and I've been the sitting judge in the 371st District Court since then. Since that time, I came to the bench with really not a lot of, I came as sort of an outsider. I was in the system, I was a DA, but I didn't have the support necessarily of the defense bar. They thought I was a little bit too tough of a prosecutor. They didn't want to see me on the bench. And some of the local Republicans weren't too happy that I'd gotten elected over the sitting Republican, because his mom had been very involved in the Republican Party in the 70s and 80s. And so he had been known to them for a long time. But while it made it harder to get elected, it gave me a certain amount of freedom, because I wasn't indebted to any particular group, and I got to do exactly what I wanted to do. I got to come in and staff my court the way I wanted and run it exactly the way I wanted. And this court turned around from being a backwater where cases took forever to get resolved, because the judge was very casual about managing his docket, to the most efficient docket in the courthouse. I run several different programs. I run a program for high-risk intimate partner violence, people who are on bond, who have been arrested for that. We use something called the lethality assessment that was developed by a nurse who's also a domestic violence researcher. And after people are arrested, they're given, the injured party in the case is given this checklist of questions to go through. And the questions really amount to whether this person is trying to exercise power and control over them. And, has this person ever assaulted you before? Do they follow you? Are they, has the violence escalated? Are they continually jealous? Have they ever threatened to kill you? Have they ever threatened you with a weapon? Have they ever choked you? Different violence and control behaviors. And so if people score high enough on that, then they come to my caseload, and I watch them very closely while they're on the pretrial part of their case. I put a GPS on them. I order no contact with the injured party, and I enforce that very stringently. So I do that I have about 200 people that I supervise on pretrial from there are 10 felony criminal courts, district courts, and I supervise people from every court who are show themselves to be either by the lethality assessment or by their behavior. If somebody gets arrested, they have a pending case and they get arrested for a new assault case, and they have priors, they'll come to my caseload and I'll watch them like that. So I do that, and I also supervise high-risk probationers from every court in a program called SWIFT. So besides just running the court getting it more efficient. I've tried to find ways to enhance community safety through the things that I do outside of trials. And the judge position, everybody thinks of it as when you're sitting in court and hearing a trial, like in what's that program, CSI. That's what the judge does all day, is just sit and listen to little bits of testimony. But what we do outside the courtroom is maybe more important than what we do inside the courtroom, because we have to oversee people who haven't gone to trial yet, who are on bond, and see what they're doing and how they're acting. Probationers, I oversee the juvenile board and my special programs that I watch people's bonds carefully, and I get reports all the time about misbehavior on bond, and I have to decide whether to issue warrants for people. I also set bonds. On revocation cases, and if somebody has a bond violation, I have to decide whether they get a new bond and in what amount. Have hearings. We do post-conviction work. After somebody is convicted, then they might come back and say, there was some grave error in my case, and my attorney did a terrible job, and I have to go back through the record of that case to decide whether that's so or not. So there's a number of different facets to being a judge. And then there's the facet of getting reelected, the politician facet. So you have to keep up your political connections and, raise money. If I drew an opponent, I would start having fundraisers, because getting reelected in a contested election, I haven't had an opponent since I ran the first time, but getting elected in a contested election takes money. You have to have money to buy signs, and you have to have money to send out mailers. A mailer to Tarrant County, to just Republican voters in Tarrant County, because the county has grown so much, would cost about $25,000. And also postage has gone up so much. It costs money to print those mailers. It costs money to put postage on those mailers. It costs money to find the voters that you want to send those mailers to. And there are professionals who will cull those lists for you, so that you don't have to try to send mail to everyone in Tarrant County, which would be insanely expensive. You want to send it to people who vote. So there's a number of different skill sets. And I find that stepping back from trial, which I enjoyed, but as I've said, is not necessarily like the blood in my veins, like it is for some people, and doing a more administrative and system-oriented job that I do now has been a delight to me. And it's really, it presents an interesting new challenge every single day. And I keep getting emails about bonds while we're talking, because everybody wants a bond set for their client on Friday afternoon. So I think that is, I've spoken for almost 40 minutes and given you guys a kind of an overview. Is there anything that anyone wants to know more about? I've given you a lot of different threads about becoming a judge, personal and professional, and I'm interested in hearing what you guys are interested in and what you'd like to know more about. What is the work culture like? It's interesting. That's an interesting question. When I took the bench, as I said, Sharon Wilson, who's now the DA, was the only other female criminal district judge. A criminal district judge handles all felony cases, and it's a rough and tumble world. There's no question about it. The people who are charged with felonies, from my long experience now, 25 years of doing this, many of them, the huge vast majority, are people who are sad and desperate. I mean, almost all the people involved in drug issues, and many of the issues that go along with drug issues, like theft and burglary, a lot of those are drug motivated. So you don't deal with necessarily, you think, oh, felons, they're terrible. Most of them are pretty sad people, or, they're mentally ill. We have a lot of mental illness in the criminal justice system. And, when you assault, it sounds terrible to say, somebody assaulted a public servant or a police officer. Well, if it's someone who is in the grips of a psychotic break and has no idea what's going on, that's a totally different story than someone who just, punches a cop because they don't like them, or something like that. So you have to sort of look at, you can't paint with a broad brush in district court, but there are gang members and people who, if they saw me out in public, they could mean me harm. And it's not typically a field where a lot of women have been on the bench. My Sharon Wilson was appointed by the governor, so she didn't have to go through a contested election like I did. I, pulled me, basically older white man off the bench and put myself in his place. And I was 37 years old at the time, so that was that was a little bit out there. I'm going to have to get a drink. Hold on for 1 second. I would say my colleagues were a little bit leery of me at first. I had my senior court officer. I mean, when you're a judge, you have several direct employees. Your court coordinator. I have a bailiff who's in charge of my security and also handles my juries. And then other employees who work under your direction, like the probation officer in your court. So my senior probation officer, after he had known me for about 6 months and we'd gotten to know each other, he said, you would not believe the things that were said about you before you took the bench, because he worked for my predecessor. He said, I was told by people in the clerk's office and others that you were a bitch and you were going to be horrible and worse. Sharon Wilson had a reputation as being difficult, that I was going to be 10 times worse than she was. So there was a lot of leeriness that I wasn't even aware of, because I came in and I'm not that person, and I have my own ideas and I can be tough on people when I think they deserve it, but I'm not, I don't just want to hammer everyone. And I've learned a lot from doing this job and from watching how people are. So when my colleagues were a little bit worried that I was going to be difficult and give them a lot of trouble. And that's how it started out. They kept me at arm's length, the other district judges. But over time, we've gotten to know each other very well. And we have a very collegial relationship. We all work as a team at the felony district level very well and very effectively. So with the other, that would be the culture of my work generally. My particular court, my employees are like my family. I mean, they are my family. They're my work family. So, and that's, when you're in a position of authority like mine, if you're at the top of an organization, like the head of a criminal district court or any organization, that organization will take on the personality of the person who runs it. And, my philosophy of this job is that I'm a public servant. I'm an elected public servant. And there's not a person who walks into the courtroom who's not part of the public that we serve. So we don't get to pick and choose. If somebody's coming, if we're my bailiffs are picking a prisoner up from the Tarrant County Jail to bring them to court, they are a member of the public that we serve, as are their family members, the injured party in the case, and that person's family members, and anyone who wants to come in to watch what I'm doing. I'm there to serve the public, and we all are. So that is the culture that I've created in my courtroom, and I expect my staff to be friendly, to be helpful. It doesn't matter if the case that somebody's asking about is in our court or somebody else's court. We're going to try to help people get where they need to get, answer their questions, and help them function when they're in the courthouse. And as far as whether I would see myself progressing as a judge, the next progression would be into an appellate court, which is a completely different practice of law. It is just abstractions. You get an appeal, which is a paper file from a case that's been decided, and there's complaints that people have made, both civil and criminal, about how the case was done that was incorrect. And it is just legal analysis, reading and writing. And over time, I love the work, but I value the relationships too. And I hear from the appellate judges that it's just like, it's like a tomb up there. I mean, nobody comes up there except for if they're making an oral argument, which is rare. And then they're just up there working by themselves. So I guess the shorter answer is no, not up to an appellate court, because I don't see myself liking that job. Any other questions? How many of you can, I think you can raise your hands. I believe that there's a hand raising. Let me see, can you raise your hand? Maybe not. How many of you are interested in doing criminal law? Is there anyone particularly interested in it? Okay, I see 2 hands. Yeah, you can raise your hand. And how many of you are interested in doing civil law? Do I know anything about immigration law? I only know a little bit about immigration law. I know as much as I need to know. When I take a plea of guilty from someone, there's this they fill out paperwork that includes whether they're a citizen or not. If they're not a citizen, then I'm required to give them some kind of warning about what might happen to them with respect to their immigration status if they enter this plea. And what will happen is largely dependent on what their status is. If they're here illegally, it doesn't matter what happens in this criminal case, they're going to get deported. If they have some kind of citizenship status, it really depends on what they're pleading guilty to. You know, if they have a green card or if they're here on DACA, then if they plead guilty to a misdemeanor, they might be allowed to stay, a felony reduced to a misdemeanor. But if they plead guilty to a felony and particularly get a conviction, they're almost certainly going to be deported. So that's really the only thing that I know about immigration law, because it's something that I have to do every day. And immigration law is it's a complicated subject. It is subject to, nothing is set in stone. I mean, it has trends. I mean, the way that immigration law was applied during the previous administration is markedly different than the way it's applied now. And I know that there's not enough immigration courts to handle all the immigration cases that we have. And everybody is always looking for a good immigration lawyer who can give them answers, because we have lots of people who are not citizens who come through the criminal justice system. So, or people who just have immigration issues that they want to further their immigration status and they need an immigration attorney without reference to criminal law. So if that's something that you're interested in, then I would urge you to continue exploring it, because there's always a demand and that's not going to go away anytime soon. Book recommendations. Let's see. This is such a good question, and I don't really have anything. I mean, the books that you hear about, or the books that I heard about, I don't even know what you guys might hear about, but the books that I heard about, like The Paper Chase, and what was the other one? Scott Turow's book. It's 1L, I think. Those are not worth your time. I mean, you're not going to Harvard Law School. It's totally different. I mean, I read those. I read 1L, which is Scott Turow's, about Scott Turow's first year at Harvard. And Harvard Law School is a cutthroat place, apparently, according to Scott Turow and the way that he told it. And people were just out to get ahead. And I was kind of expecting that when I got to Texas Tech Law School, that people were just going to cut your knees out from under you if they could, just so that, you'd be out of the way and they'd be that much further on. But that's not the way it worked at all. I mean, people were very cooperative. If we were all working we all had to go look at a certain source in the library. And that was back before we had easy access to research databases like they do now. We'd have to go look up stuff in the library all the time. If there was one particular source, then you would find that people would hand it to you when you came looking for it, because it, go through a lot of hands because everybody's looking for the same thing. And, in 1L, people would have torn it to shreds and thrown it away so that you couldn't look at it and they'd be the only one who was able to answer that question correctly. So, I would say don't look at those because that's not my experience. Trying to think, there was a book that I read as a young lawyer that I really enjoyed called The Civil Action. That's a nonfiction book about a complex litigation about, I think it was like a pollution issue and whether it caused a leukemia cluster in Massachusetts and how the lawyer handled it. It was a really gripping, interesting story. It outlines sort of how a civil case goes forward, a complicated civil case goes forward, and it's true. So I found it to be really interesting. So I might recommend that to you. I have to say I'm more of a still English major in tastes, so I don't really read a lot about law because I do it so much. So if I'll look and see if there's anything else that I can email to you guys that might be of interest to you, but I don't really watch TV shows about law or movies about law or read books about law anymore, since I could write one, I guess, if I got motivated enough, possibly. Yeah, don't worry about 1L. I got a message. I'm reading 1L and it's scaring me. Yeah, it's not really that. I don't think that there's maybe UT is like that, although I doubt it. It's just law school's not like that. And let's see, my office does offer some internships. Oh my gosh, I've gotten like 20 emails while we've been in this. Through our Judicial Staff Council. Judicial Staff Council are the attorneys that advise the judges, and they offer internships in the summer. They have usually 9 or 10 openings, and it's a really good program. They have a chance to go through a writ, and go through an actual writ of habeas corpus for a prisoner who's challenging their conviction. You'll go through and review the record and see if their complaints seem to have any merit to them and make a recommendation to the staff council, and then you'll come and present that to the judge. We assign any special projects that we might have for interns to do research for us. You have a chance to, if it's not in COVID, we would have a tour of the jail, or a chance for a ride along with a police officer, various things like that. I think that's been in suspense because of COVID, but we did have the actual internship. So I would direct you to that, and I will get you a link to that program so that you guys can have it to refer to and apply to. You know what, actually, I'm saying that like I'm talking to law students. That's for law students. Your best bet would be to apply directly to the judges. And I get applications from time to time. The best thing to do is just put a letter stating what your interest is with with a resume, and mail it to all the judges. Our address is on the website, on the Tarrant County website, and you just mail it to each individual judge and tell them what you might be able to do for them. That, I can do research on topics, I can do filing, I can do, any administrative task or what you have in mind, because that's the most helpful. Undergraduate interns are sometimes hard to find what they can do that will be helpful to you and helpful to them. So that might be, something you would think about. I would say send it to the physical address, and it'll get to the judge. I get all those on my desk. The email addresses, most of the judges don't have email addresses on the website because we don't want to receive emails from irate family members or people who are, trying to give us a tip about something, or we can't find out information about cases from just the general public. So you're not going to find those addresses very easily, or you shouldn't. You can send an email to the court coordinator and it'll get in front of the judge, but the judges know. Any other questions? Hey, here's my request of you. Would you all turn on your cameras for a second? I'd just love to see your faces. Hey guys, it's good to see you. That way I have just like a feeling for who I'm talking to. It really is a strange feeling to talk to a bunch of names. It's good to see you all. Does anyone have any other questions for me? Fire away. I know Cass was at my office doing an internship, and I don't know if you have any thoughts about whether it was what you expected or what what your thoughts were about what you saw on the criminal side.
In all honesty, the criminal side scared me. I know that it definitely takes a certain person to feel comfortable in the criminal field, but that internship was with UTA. I believe it was called the Courting to Success internship, and so next summer, if they open up applications again, I definitely recommend everybody applying. It was a great opportunity. We were able to rotate between courts every week. So I was with Judge Westfall for a week.
Highly recommend you guys doing that. It was fun to have everyone for a week, and they got to see, criminal court is a busy place. We have to keep moving all the time because I get 2,000 cases filed in my court every year, and that's a lot of work. And if we are not working all the time, we're going to get further and further behind. So we are doing something every day, all the time, to try to keep those cases moving forward. Any other questions, comments? I'll try to figure out what other books I might recommend, but Civil Action is the one that comes to mind immediately. Well, I think I've kept you guys for an hour, so I appreciate you being here. And let me just urge you that, besides just stepping out of your comfort zone, like I said, and that will always pay you a dividend if you, are open to learning and to the discomfort of just doing that, but also doing what you're doing right now, which is getting involved. That I look at intern resumes. I've looked at hundreds of intern resumes and young lawyers' resumes, and the more you have on there that you're really involved in, that it's one thing to have something that you just have gone to a couple meetings and you write it down, or you went to one weekend doing something. That's not that. It just doesn't tell me that much about you. But when you're really involved in like a women in law group or any other group, it tells a potential employer something about you, and it gives you something to talk about, that this is what I learned, this is what I did, and those kinds of things will pay you back. The things that you put yourself into will pay you back. So I'm glad to see you all. I didn't have the sense to do anything like this, and I'm not even sure there was a group like this when I was at UT. But if there was, I didn't know about it. And if there had been, I probably wouldn't have gone, because I wasn't even thinking about law school until I was about to graduate. So there's that too.
Well, thank you so much, Judge Westfall.
You're welcome. My pleasure. And, anytime, if any of you want to come visit court, I'd love to have you. Let me know when you would like to be here. October 11th is my next trial, because we are doing inventory docket to try to reduce our backlog. But October 11th, right now, I have scheduled a trial that involves a guy who's charged with aggravated robbery, but he also did something allegedly that caused him to be much higher profile. He allegedly escaped from our high security local jail and jumped out the window and allegedly broke his ankles, and was then taken back into custody. So he's a sort of a high risk inmate, and I know that he is going to be, it's going to be an interesting trial. He is also supposedly threatening the prosecutor and saying he's going to do something to her. And so I think it's going to be kind of a unpredictable. Usually I can predict how trials are going to go, and I'm not really sure how this one's going to go, but October 11th, we'll pick a jury and we'll start testimony on October 12th. And so if you want more information, feel free to follow up with me and I'll let you know how to get here and how to watch. Let me put my court at 42985. This is the direct line to my judge's bailiff, whose name is Fred. And if you call him and say, you know, Judge Westfall told us about a trial on October 11th. What should I do? You know, I was in a speaking, you know, she spoke to me, my class at UTA, then he will tell you everything you need to know because it's open to the public anyway. So anyone who calls and wants to come, he's going to make sure that you get the information that you need. And Fred's super nice. So maybe I'll see you on October 12th. Bye, ladies.
Thank
it's
you
great.
So much.
My pleasure. Great to talk.
Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Bye. Thank you.